Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Saturday, February 13th, 2021, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Trump acquittal in the United States Senate, pretty much solidifying that the Senate finds Donald Trump not guilty, but there is still major implications now that we have found out that 7 United States senators from the Republican Party have voted to convict President Trump. This is more than the Democrats received back in 2020 when they were able to just get Mitt Romney's vote to convict President Trump the first time he had been impeached. Previously, there had never been a member of the president's party voting to convict the president ever in United States history. We had a time period back under Bill Clinton where Democrats in the House, 5 of them voted to convict or impeach. Need to stop mixing up those words, impeach President Clinton at the time, but no Senate Democrats voted to convict President Clinton. Now, what we see is not only one, which was very similar to what we saw back in 2020, that was Mitt Romney. Not even Lisa Murkowski or Susan Collins voted to convict President Trump back then. But now what we are seeing is pretty much 7 Republicans, and we're going to talk about those states, talk about why we might see these Republicans pretty much come out against President Trump in the future if he does try to run for office, and why some of these Republicans weren't so afraid of President Trump as others might be, because he still holds a lot of weight. And I think that largely has to do with the fact that he won the most votes for any Republican in United States history. While he lost the presidential election, he didn't lose by a lot. So pretty much what we saw in 2020 was Donald Trump's ability to carry some down-ballot races while losing the top of the ticket, but still holding a very positive approval rating even after the Capitol insurrection amongst Republicans, which strikes a fear in the hearts of many of these Republicans who know as soon as President Trump releases a statement against them, they will be primaried. They will be facing the harshest political bid that they ever had in their entire lifetimes. And, that is something that many Republicans are afraid of. So many of them did vote in self-interest today. And whether or not they agreed that Donald Trump should have been convicted or acquitted, many of them realized that no matter what they do, either they're going to be criticized by the left or criticized by Donald Trump, and they'd much rather be criticized by the left if they're in a state where Joe Biden only received 30% of the vote or 35% of the vote. But let's take a look at the map. Let's visualize this. Let's take a look at the convict vote versus the acquit vote. Now, this is a little confusing. This is a little bit misleading as well. Looking at the map itself, there's a lot of blue. Blue means convict, red means acquit. But you're seeing a lot of red dots. These means that these are Republican senators from solid Republican states or swing states that voted to acquit President Trump. The reason why I have the blue covering the majority of the states is because we are working within a map where we only have the option of choosing small circles and the larger state. So I just chose the larger one for whichever either party or whatever I'm representing is in the majority. And in this case, that was the convict vote. And that was 57 senators. And I know what you're thinking, if you don't exactly know how this process works, you need a 2/3 majority in the United States Senate to convict a president, I guess sitting president, but at this time, President Trump. So a simple majority was not enough. And the Democrats would have had the simple majority with just simply their Senate majority. But not only did they need, more than a simple majority, they needed to convince very staunch Republicans to vote against a president who carried them in some of these races across the finish line. And I think many of them did feel as if they owed a service to President Trump, even if they thought that he was in a way guilty, even if they thought that he was, as many of them had stated in the past, responsible for the Capitol riots. They also have to realize that he was someone who really helped the Republican Party. So he was someone who was able to win them down ballot races. And I think that many of them are repaying his debt that way. But looking at the 57 senators, they come from states that you wouldn't really expect. We have a senator from Nebraska, a solid Republican state, a Republican senator from Louisiana, another solid Republican state. We have a Republican from North Carolina and Pennsylvania, 2 staunch Republicans, lifetime Republicans, solid Republicans in their voting records, but surprised us nonetheless by voting to convict President Trump. But looking at those senators, while they may have, put, as the Democrats put it, put country over party, you have to realize that they had no type of loss by doing this. Because looking at Pennsylvania and North Carolina specifically, these Republicans are retiring. These Republicans are leaving office in 2022. So they're not worried about a primary. They're not worried about a general election re-election bid. All they're worried about is what their legacy is going to be as they're leaving. And I think this points out that pretty much, The senators who voted against or to convict President Trump, none of them were truly surprising, except for Richard Burr and also Bill Cassidy in Louisiana. Looking at the vote there, what you have to realize is out of these three, CNN actually discusses all 7 of these senators. They come from regions of the country where they are solid no matter what they do, or they have been firm critics of President Trump in the past. Burr was probably the only one who was truly surprising. Bill Cassidy might have been a few weeks ago, but looking at the way that he was handling the proof that was being shown by the House managers, well, he certainly felt uncomfortable and was indicating that he was voting to convict. Well, being at 57, that did exceed the Democratic Party's expectations, but it fell short by 10. But looking at these Republicans, Lisa Murkowski is no surprise. She's always been a firm critic of President Trump. She may not have voted to convict in the past, but she certainly has been no fan and, not a yes woman to President Trump. Looking at the state of Maine, we have Susan Collins, someone who has voted against President Trump in a multitude of issues, typically votes with him, but has always been a critic of President Trump. We also have Mitt Romney, a very outspoken critic. I'd argue probably one of the most outspoken critics in recent history. We have Ben Sasse from Nebraska, who built his 2015 and 2016 news cycle based off of just criticizing President Trump as the candidate and also as the nominee. So looking at these senators, I would not be shocked had you told me this a month ago, that Ben Sasse and Mitt Romney and Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins would have voted to convict President Trump. I mean, had you told me a month ago that, no, the Capitol riots were more than a month ago, so I would have believed this, absolutely. But Cassidy, Burr, and Toomey and Burr make sense. They're off. They're gone. But Cassidy, he comes from a solid Republican state. Honestly, the worst he would face is a primary. And at the end of the day, he's up there for a very long time. Longer than most of these senators have until the re-election bids. So looking at his security, all of these Republicans, they either had no real electoral incentive by voting to acquit President Trump, or they have just been really outspoken critics of Donald Trump since the beginning. Outspoken since the beginning. Mitt Romney was a huge critic of Trump even before he was elected. Sasse was as well. Murkowski and Collins were as well. I'm not surprised to see they joined the Democratic Party in this vote. But I am surprised to see Cassidy and Burr and Toomey. But I think if we're looking at Pennsylvania and North Carolina as an example, I think the reason why these Republicans voted to convict President Trump was not because they are rhinos, as President Trump would put it. It's not because they are, Democrats. It's not because they are hating President Trump. It's because they have nothing to worry about. You see, all of these other Republicans, we see so many of them criticize President Trump. We saw Mitch McConnell the day of the Capitol insurrection blame President Trump. 3 weeks later, blame President Trump. The day before Biden was inaugurated, blamed President Trump. After voting not guilty, blamed President Trump, criticized him for almost everything that we had seen happen. Not only that, we also, you need to realize that looking at these Republican senators, when they go back to their constituents that voted for Trump by 30 percentage points, by 20 percentage points, what do they tell them? When you find out that they voted to convict the president you voted for, 2 out of 3 voters in the state voted for that person, when you get to that primary ballot, you're out. And I think this is an indicator that while the GOP did today prevent Donald Trump from being convicted by the United States Senate, they certainly had something, that they were upset with him. Toomey and Burr confirm it. Burr was shocking. He's as party line Republican as any other Republican on the map, even more so than others. Toomey was not so surprising, but prior to 2020 or prior to the 2020 election results would have absolutely been, surprising. But considering that they are retiring, considering they are leaving, since they have nothing to worry about, they're going to do it. And I think if all of these Republicans had the option to be in their position, if they knew that they were going to be on their way out in 2 years, I can guarantee you now, President Trump would have been convicted. These 2 senators, along with the 5 others, sort of confirm that. When there's no electoral advantage, or at least you won't be impacted too heavily by your vote, by your constituents, because you have been this vocal before, or you've just been reelected, or you are retiring, which is the case for all 7 of these senators. What happens is you vote your conscience. What happens is you vote the way that you want to vote. Lisa Murkowski, while up in 2022, ranked choice voting is going to save her. Susan Collins, just reelected in 2020. This is probably her last term. Richard Burr, Pat Toomey, on their way out. Ben Sasse, very outspoken critic of President Trump. Mitt Romney, very outspoken critic of President Trump. Bill Cassidy, just elected by the United States Senate in 2020. So looking at the results of previous elections, and despite them being outspoken critics of President Trump, they have won their elections. They have won their elections in the past, and they will return to their constituents and probably win again. But the same cannot be said for a lot of these other Republicans. The problem is, for a lot of these Republicans, they're going to be up in 22. And President Trump has promised to primary those who are not vehement supporters of him, who are not diehard supporters of President Trump. And I think that strikes fear into the hearts of many of these people. Because what we see now is that previous critics of President Trump have bent to his agenda. When you look at the impeachment trials of previous presidents, the most Democrats did in 1998, the most they did then, when they voted on whether or not Bill Clinton needed to be impeached, only 5 of them went along with it. Only 5 Democrats. The Democrats didn't have the majority, which is why Bill Clinton was impeached, but only 5. There was actually, we'll talk about what there was here, but looking at the Senate, none. 0. None whatsoever. Let's take a look at Andrew Johnson, someone who was infamous because he fell 1 vote short of being impeached. But did that mean any Democrats had voted to impeach him? None in the House. Well, let's take a look at the Senate. None in the Senate as well. The Democrats may have only had 9 seats, but they were joined by 10 Republicans who ultimately helped them prevent this president from being impeached. 1 vote short, still couldn't get a single crossover vote. None. Donald Trump is the first to experience this on the Senate level. First in 2020, second in 2021. The only president to have been impeached twice. Now, in terms of the way that the impeaching President Trump happened, in 2019 when this occurred, President Trump was people voted against his impeachment, but overall, the House had voted to impeach President Trump with no help from the Republican Party. Only 1 vote in the Senate from the Republican Party, and that was Mitt Romney. The same cannot be said for the second impeachment trial. Take a look at this vote. 10 Republicans voted to impeach President Trump. It was a very similar number to what we saw back in 2019, but the House majority was a lot slimmer for the Democrats. In the Senate, what we saw was pretty much, I don't think they've updated it actually on the Wikipedia page, but what we saw was 7 crossover votes. We have never seen crossover support in the Senate. No matter how close it was back in the 1800s, no matter how technically, it wasn't even really close it was in 1998, 1999, this takes the cake. 7 Republicans with no electoral advantage indicates that they believe, if they do not have anything to worry about, that we could possibly have seen more Republicans voting to convict. I don't think it's a coincidence that the 43 acquittal votes, the majority of them have an immediate re-election bid in 22 or in 24. The ones up in 26 have nothing to worry about. Biden could be out. Kamala could be out. The Democrats could be in the minority by then. Whatever it is. But for these immediate Republicans, when they turn to President Trump for support in 22, for support in 24, I don't think it'll extend as far out as 26, they're going to need to show him, I voted to acquit you. I'm the reason you weren't convicted by the Senate. I'm the reason you can run in 2024, and they need that. But for these 7 other Republicans, at the end of the day, if they have no real reason to cling on to President Trump the way that they did in the general election season, or they did in 2018, or they did in 2016, and now they're just going to vote the way that they want to, well, ultimately we see 7 Republicans cross over. The Democrats may have fell short by 10, but history certainly was made today. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my post-2020 election videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all tomorrow.